Hey everyone, this is David Brown with the migration update for April 11th, 2023 from the Braddock Bay Hawk Watch. And what a spectacular day it was. I have a lot of photos to get through, so I'll move relatively quickly. I started the day off at sunrise at the Braddock Bay East Spit. Here's a male blue-winged teal that flew by, and it appears to be banded. And we also heard a lot of leopard frogs calling and saw this one on the trail. I got to the hawk platform around 8:45, and it was partly sunny in the morning, sort of a thin layer of clouds that thickened throughout the day and got quite dark towards the end of the day as some rain went off to our south. Overall, the winds were moderate to strong from the west-southwest the entire day, so really good winds, and we had a really big raptor flight and many excellent looks. Here's a male wood duck flying past. Here's a male northern harrier, also known as a gray ghost, and we saw a lot of these adult male northern harriers today. Here's a sharp-shinned hawk, and this will be one of many sharp-shinned hawks that we'll see in this video, so it's good to kind of get a sense of the silhouette. Remember that sharp-shinned hawks are accipiters. They're sort of the smaller cousin of the Cooper's hawk and the northern goshawk. They have relatively small heads compared to Cooper's hawks. And all accipiters have long tails, but the tails on sharpshins look a little shorter than the tails on Cooper's hawks. And also, their wings don't look as long and lanky as the wings on Cooper's hawks. So overall, sharp-shinned hawks just look a little bit more compact than Cooper's hawks. And we know this is an adult because it has the orange barring underneath. Here's a side and top view of a juvenile sharp-shinned hawk. You see the juveniles are brown on top. And notice the tail, it's very squared off at the tip, and that's typical for sharp-shinned hawks because all of the tail feathers are about the same length, compared to Cooper's hawks where the tail can look more rounded because the outer tail feathers are shorter than the middle ones. Here we have a great egret, so a large white wading bird with a big yellow beak. Here's a male American kestrel. Remember that kestrels are falcons, so they have pointed wingtips. Kestrels have a really distinctive facial pattern, and we know it's a male because of the spotting on the underside. Here's another adult sharp-shinned hawk, so we see that orange barring underneath. See a bit of a full crop here, so that would be a sign that it has eaten recently. On sharpshins, the dark blue stretches all the way from the top of the head onto the back, compared to Cooper's hawks that have a pale nape in this area. We also see that really squared off tail because all of the tail feathers are approximately the same length. Here we have a juvenile red-shouldered hawk. So red-shouldered hawks are buteos, similar to red-tailed hawks, but we see on this red shoulder that it does not have dark patagial bars like we would see on red tails, and it doesn't really have that distinctive belly band that red tails have, but more streaking that starts on the upper breast and continues down. And we also see that it has translucent crescents near the wingtip, and that's often one of the first things you'll notice on red-shouldered hawks. Both adults and juveniles show these translucent crescents near the wingtips. Here we have an adult red-tailed hawk, so we can see the dark patagial bars and the belly band, and it's an adult, so it has a dark trailing edge to the wing, and a red tail, although from some angles underneath, the red tail doesn't show as well. The red really shows a lot more from the top side view. Here's another adult sharp-shinned hawk, and this is just classic sharp-shinned hawk silhouette. Relatively small head, kind of stocky appearance overall, slightly more rounded looking wings, not as lanky as Cooper's hawks, and again, kind of a squared off tail tip because all of the tail feathers are the same length. Here we have a juvenile red-tailed hawk, so looks a little bit more pale than the adults do. It has the dark patagial bars in the belly band just like the adults, but it doesn't have that dark border to the wings. We had our first broad-winged hawks of the season today. We had 15 of them total. And broad-winged hawks are buteos, just like red-tailed hawks and red-shouldered hawks, but broadwings are smaller than either of those two species. They're the smallest buteo that we see, and they have kind of a distinctive shape to them. So we see that this one is in a glide posture, and this is an adult. So we see the dark trailing edge to the wing. We also see kind of a dark tail with a white stripe, which we'll take a closer look at in some other photos. But notice the trailing edge of the wing. It's almost a completely straight line. So you get kind of a rounded front to the wing and a completely straight trailing edge. Sometimes it's called the paring knife shape. So that straight trailing edge is one field mark we can look for. Just a small stocky buteo with a really straight trailing edge and a glide. Here's a juvenile sharp-shinned hawk, and from this angle it just looks kind of really bulky underneath, just the shape of the body and everything, because it's slightly coming at us. But again, we see that really squared off tip to the long tail. Here we have another look at an adult broad-winged hawk, and again we see that perfectly straight trailing edge to the wings in the glide posture. Here's a nice topside view of an adult sharp-shinned hawk, and notice that field mark from before where the dark blue on top of the head continues all the way down the back of the neck and onto the back of the bird. Here's an adult red-tailed hawk, so we see those dark patagial bars and belly band, and the dark trailing edge to the wing and the red tail. And this is a rather heavily marked individual, so this is probably from the northern or Abieticola subspecies. Compare that to this juvenile red-tailed hawk, where again we see the dark patagial bars and belly band, but we don't have the dark trailing edge to the wing. And in fact, we have these translucent panels on the inner primaries, so these juvenile red tails just look a little bit more pale overall, a little bit more light shining through them too. And we see that it doesn't have a red tail, it's got kind of a brown tail with some banding on it. Here we have the top side of a golden eagle. You can see that tail with a white tail base and a dark tip. We see some markings here on the upper side of the bird, and I know that in the fall, when you see those kinds of markings, it indicates that the bird's not a juvenile, that it would be a subadult or an adult. I'm not 100% sure in the spring because I know sometimes juveniles can be faded and show similar markings, so not 100% sure on that. I'll have to do a little more research. But you can see it has a relatively small head compared to a bald eagle, which would have a really big head. But here we see it's a small head, especially compared to the size of the tail. And this golden eagle ended up coming fairly close. Here it is in a soaring posture, and we can see that it has a lot of white in the wings, big white wing patches. And that's very typical for immature golden eagles, that we're looking for these white patches that are sort of in the center of the wings and the base of the tail. It's almost like 3 different points of white. Very different from the immature bald eagles that we see that have a lot of splotchy white and light browns and a lot of white in the wing pit areas and just splotchy on the breast and belly. Golden eagles look very clean. You get these couple areas that are white, but otherwise pretty clean looking bird. And you can see the golden nape here that gives golden eagles their name. And again, really small head compared to the size of the tail. And here's the same golden eagle in the glide posture. So you can see it's just pushed its wings forward a little bit, and sometimes when they're in the glide like this, the white patches just kind of change shape a little bit. They don't look as big sometimes. And one last look at the same golden eagle gliding away from us. And you can imagine if you saw this bird in bad light, that this shape is extremely similar to the shape of a turkey vulture. So sometimes we have to look really carefully if we don't catch a bird until it's passing overhead to make sure we're not writing it off as just another turkey vulture when it's actually a golden eagle. Here's another adult red-tailed hawk, and we see those same field marks, dark patagial bars. This one has a really dark splotchy belly band. So again, I think this is probably of the northern Abieticola subspecies, just because it's more heavily marked. We also see that it looks like it has a dark throat, which is another supporting field mark for that subspecies. Here's another adult sharp-shinned hawk, and again, this one has a full crop, indicating that it has eaten recently. Here's a nice look at a great blue heron. Here's another juvenile red-shouldered hawk, and red shoulders could sometimes trick you into thinking that they're accipiters just because of the way they fly. They tend to flap a lot, and they have a relatively long tail, so sometimes we have to be careful, but we can still see those translucent crescents near the wingtips. Here's a juvenile sharp-shinned hawk. So you can see the light eye color. You can see sort of a vertical streaking. Again, that's if the bird was perched upright in front of us, it's a vertical streaking. And we can see that the tail feathers are all the same length. Here's another juvenile red-shouldered hawk. And all of the red shoulders we saw today, except for one, were juveniles. I did see one adult, but the adults mostly migrated earlier in the season. Now we're getting mostly the juvenile red shoulders. And we can see those translucent crescents near the wingtips on both wings. And pay attention to how many feathers make up the wingtip. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feathers making up the wingtip of this red-shouldered hawk, giving it a more squared-off appearance, which we can compare to the more pointed appearance of broad-winged hawks because they only have 4 feathers. Here's a horned lark flying past, and we had a few small flocks of horned larks throughout the day. Here's another adult sharp-shinned hawk. You can see the red eye, see that blue that extends from the top of the head onto the back, and the really squared-off tail, and also the orange barring indicates adult. We had a lot of groups of turkey vultures throughout the day. Sometimes they were getting to the west spit and then hesitating, and the size of the group would grow, and then eventually they'd break across. So it's a little bit on and off, not a steady stream of vultures. We had vultures in sight pretty much the whole day, but they were kind of coming through in clumps. So here's just one group migrating through. And up above those vultures were 4 sandhill cranes. Here's a juvenile sharp-shinned hawk. We can see the lighter colored eye and the vertical streaking. And on some sharp shins, the outer tail feathers are slightly shorter than the central ones. So sometimes they do have a little bit of a rounded tail tip like you might see on a Cooper's hawk, but it's usually not as extreme. And it's usually the female sharp-shinned hawks, which are the bigger ones, that show that slightly rounded tail tip. Here's another juvenile sharp-shinned hawk. And it appears that this one also has a full crop. Here's a male American kestrel. You can see it's got hardly any markings at all underneath, just a little bit of spotting. And here's a female American kestrel, and we can see that the females are completely brown on top. Here's a male brown-headed cowbird, and it looks like someone took the bird and just dipped his head in chocolate. Here's another male American kestrel. Here's another adult broad-winged hawk, and you can see they don't always have that completely straight trailing edge to the wing. Sometimes they tuck their wingtips back a little bit, and you get a little bit of a crook in the wing. And we see that this bird has some feather damage, both on the wingtips and the tip of the tail. Here we have a juvenile bald eagle, so one that would have been born last year. You can see that even trailing edge to the wing, except it looks like it's already replacing this inner primary feather here, so starting to molt. We also see that the underside is starting to become quite white, which is typical for second and third year bald eagles. Here's another adult male northern harrier, so we just see that really distinctive plumage with kind of a gray or silvery color and a lot of white underneath. Here's a juvenile red-tailed hawk, so again, dark patagial bars and belly band, but no dark trailing edge to the wing and no red tail. Here's an adult broad-winged hawk in a soar, and look at the shape of the wingtips. We see 1, 2, 3, 4 feathers, giving the wingtips a more pointed appearance. So just kind of a small, stocky buteo with more pointed wingtips. And if we look at the tail, especially if you were to see this bird from a distance, it looks like a dark tail with one wide white band, at least compared to the tail on adult red shoulders, which looks like a blackboard with very thin chalk lines. From a distance, you're seeing a dark tail with a wide white band for adult broad-winged hawks. And adult broadwings have a dark trailing edge to the wing. And let me also mention that we see the adult broad-winged hawks migrating first. So early in the season like this, we're pretty much only seeing adults, and then later on we'll see all of the juveniles. And that's true for most of our raptors because you figure the adults have to get up to their nesting grounds, so they're competing for territories. So it's a little bit more urgent for them to get up north quickly. Here's an osprey flying by and checking us out. Here's an adult broad-winged hawk that made a very close pass. Nice topside view of it, and again you can see that black tail with wide white bands on it. And here's an underside view of the same bird showing us that nice plumage. You can see the very straight dark trailing edge. You can get a sense of that horizontal dark barring on the underside. And usually their eyes as adults are more of a dark brown. This one looks a little bit pale, as someone commented on Facebook and pointed out. And again, on that tail, we see sort of a dark tail with wide white band in the middle. Here's a top side view of a male American kestrel. So you can see that orange back and tail, and the wings are blue and black. Here's a somewhat distant view of a red-tailed hawk, but it gives you a sense of the silhouette. It's kind of a big, bulky buteo. And you can sort of make out the dark patagial bars and belly band and the dark trailing edge and the red tail that let us ID it as an adult red-tailed hawk. Here's a female American kestrel, so you can see that more vertical streaking on the breast. Here's a common raven, and you can tell these apart from crows. Just they look a little bit lankier. The head looks a little bigger, the tail looks a little bigger, the wings look a little longer. Wingtips are a little more pointed, and if you saw this bird in person, it just stood out just the way it was flapping and moving, that it was a bigger bird than the crows we were seeing throughout the day. Here's another adult red-tailed hawk, and this one also looks fairly heavily marked. Fairly dark color to the head with a dark throat, fairly big belly band and dark patagial bars. So again, this could probably be considered the northern or Abieticola subspecies. Here's a bird that caused some discussion in the field even. It was called out as a big accipiter, and there was some debate over whether it was a Cooper's hawk or a northern goshawk. I thought it was a Cooper's hawk, and that's what I put it down as. Some people, after seeing the photos, have suggested that maybe it is a northern goshawk. Something I'll need to look into a little bit farther and get some more opinions, and hopefully look at the photos with fresh eyes when I haven't been out birding for 12 hours and had a really long day. So stay tuned. This one may get changed to northern goshawk, but my impression in the field was just Cooper's hawk. But they're tough sometimes. They don't always come and give us the closest views, and sometimes you just end up with a few lousy photos. So can't identify them all. Here's another adult red-tailed hawk, and again, this is a fairly heavily marked one. And on the top side, you can see that it has a red tail. The red coloration doesn't show as well from the underside. Here's another juvenile red-shouldered hawk. You can see they droop their wings a little bit, and we can see those translucent crescents near the wingtips. Here's another male American kestrel. This is another adult sharp-shinned hawk. Here's a Bonaparte's gull. So they're fairly distinctive compared to the other gulls we're seeing. Especially note that on the wings, the black is only at the very tips of the feathers, so you get this kind of black bar on the wing. And a lot of the Bonaparte's gulls we're seeing have completely black heads at this point. They're in breeding plumage, and some of them, like this one, are more in the transition stage where their head is starting to get fairly black. Here's another juvenile red-tailed hawk. You can see fairly faint patagial bars and belly band, and juvenile so does not have the bold dark trailing edge or the red tail. Here's another adult sharp-shinned hawk. Here's a juvenile bald eagle. You can see fairly dark underneath and on the head and body, but a lot of white in the wing pit area. Here's 3 out of a group of 4 Wilson snipes that flew by. Here's a male American kestrel staring into my soul. And here's an osprey also staring down at me, and I think that ospreys sometimes look a little goofy with how big their eyeballs are. If we take a look at the eBird checklist, from the East Spit this morning we had 66 species. And from the HawkWatch platform I had 68 species today. Taking a look at the HawkCount report for our migrant raptor totals today, we had 1,002 turkey vultures, 4 osprey, 17 bald eagles, 36 northern harriers, 257 sharp-shinned hawks, 11 Cooper's hawks. For buteos, we had 28 red-shouldered hawks, 15 broad-winged hawks, 170 red-tailed hawks. We had 1 golden eagle, and for falcons, we had 57 kestrels and 2 merlins, for a total of exactly 1,600 migrant raptors today. That brings the April total to 12,763, and the season total to 21,935. And in my write-up here, I said not the highest total of the season, but the best views of a big flight. And I think that really sums up what happened today. We just had a really good flight. Some birds were off to the sides, but a lot of them were coming close to the platform, fairly low, getting the first big flight of Sharpies and Kestrels of the season. And that's the one fun part about this middle part of the season. As the broad-winged hawk numbers pick up, we have the fun of counting those large groups, but we also get these days with really low flights of accipiters and falcons. So really good chance to get close views and also get good photos. I had one new species for the season today, which was Savannah Sparrow. Taking a look at the forecast for tomorrow, some clouds in the morning, then mainly sunny, high near 70. Winds west-southwest at 5 to 10, increasing to 15 to 25 late in the day. But it looks like for most of the count period, it will be a relatively light wind, a light westerly wind for the most part. Kind of similar to yesterday in that regard, that it's very light winds. So the concern with light winds is always that a lake breeze could kick in, which a northeast lake breeze pushes the birds away from the lake shore, just doesn't keep the birds concentrated over the park. So sometimes we move the Frisbee Hill on those days. I'm hoping the lake breeze doesn't kick in, and since it's a westerly wind, hopefully that wind will be strong enough to prevent a lake breeze, and we'll be able to stay at the platform all day. And it looks like late in the day, as the wind starts to pick up, we might get a push of raptors, especially if the wind shifts southwest there at the end. So long story short, I'm thinking it's looking like a pretty good day overall if those conditions hold. If we do get the lake breeze, it looks like that could slow things down. But overall, looking forward to a good day. Now, with those light winds and sunny skies, a lot of raptors will probably be up higher using thermals compared to today when everything was down low. So maybe we'll get the next push of broad-winged hawks. So hope to see you out at the platform tomorrow. For Thursday, looking sunny with a high in the low to mid 70s. Winds west-southwest at 10 to 20 miles per hour. So that's looking like excellent conditions. Expect good migration. And then for Friday, partly cloudy skies, high in the low 60s. Light southwest winds shifting to a northeast lake breeze. So would only expect light, maybe moderate migration for Friday. So a little bit of a break. All right, well, today was a lot of fun. Got out birding early, birded from about 6:30 a.m. until 6 p.m. and have been spending the rest of the evening going through my photos and entering data and recording this video. It's 10:30 now. I'm going to edit this video quick and upload it and get to bed so that I can get out and do it all again tomorrow. Hope to see you out at the Braddock Bay Hawk Watch soon. From Lyco Birds, this is David Brown. Thanks for watching.